Wow, so meaning in just about a year, the athletes could start getting paid directly from the school. To talk more about this lawsuit and its future for college sports, we are joined by Gina Antoniello. She's an academic director and assistant professor of sport management at New York University. Gina, thank you so much for taking time to talk with us. Kind of break this down for us, if you will. What this means. We heard the story that I think detailed it pretty well before you. I mean, in the past, college athletes got an education, but universities were making collectively billions of dollars each year. Is this something that was long overdue? It's clearly going to change the landscape of sports.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Sean, for having me. And when we're looking at legal precedent in particular, ever since the NCAA lost O'Bannon versus the NCAA a decade ago, and especially since they lost NCAA versus Alston a few years ago, this concept of amateurism and the NCAA's system of rules that tries to distinguish college athletes from professionals by limiting how colleges economically compete for them has really been in retreat. This precedent really set the table for lawmakers to pursue and adopt name, image, and likeness that guarantee that college athletes can use a legal right they already have as Americans, which is the right of publicity, without running afoul of NCAA rules. So yeah, this is a long time in the making, Sean.
Okay, for an international audience, let's break this down in two ways. Because one, we have NIL, which is what you're talking about there, where basically athletes could go out there and sign lucrative contracts. We all know who Deion Sanders is, and his kids have done extraordinarily well in this NIL world. But also what we're talking about now is schools paying directly to these athletes. And we heard in Hendrick's story, the rich get richer. For example, Alabama football spends $80 million a year on its program. At the other end of the scale, in the powerful SEC college football, Mississippi State spends about $40 million. So how can Mississippi State keep up? Alabama seems like it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and the other schools are going to struggle more and more.
Absolutely. Well, when we're thinking about this new settlement, I want to kind of backtrack a little bit. The settlement now that the NCAA is pursuing values it at about $2.7 billion. And then this contemplates athletes receiving various levels of compensation. So now going forward, conferences will actually be able to share revenue with athletes. And this is all going to ramp up as details of the settlement are worked out and before it really gains this judicial approval. So this is going to allow conferences to set their own rules on player compensation, including whether the athletes are employees and really ought to get that cut of TV and other licensing money. So conference empowerment is really crucial to any reform here because the Supreme Court, the law of the land, has said as much.
Okay, let's talk about one thing that's unfortunate it could happen, and that is the lesser-known sports. Women's golf, men's wrestling, things like that. They could be shoved out very, very easily in this, right?
You know what? It's really, when we're thinking about this settlement in particular, scholarship caps are eliminated and new roster limits will likely be implemented. So when we're thinking about potential litigation brought by athletes. We've talked about unionization in the segment before. New NCAA rules that cap athlete compensation, like a de facto salary cap, are vulnerable to potential antitrust scrutiny. So when we're thinking about Title IX, leading colleges paying male athletes more than female athletes, while conferences have not been found liable under Title IX, this certainly presents a really crucial issue when it comes to equity, particularly as it relates to non-revenue generating sports and women's sports.
Okay, let me ask you point blank. Do you think this is a good thing for college athletics?
Well, it depends on who you're asking, right? So college athletics, in a way, I really do believe this ends amateurism in college sports. So the NCAA really is on the verge of its system being obliterated in court. And that's why the settlement came, because they're trying to mitigate potential billions in damages, even more so than what they're willing to settle now. So they're looking to undertake major reforms quickly. Otherwise, the NCAA itself is going to be compelled to change the rules and likely pay out, even more billions of dollars. So where's that money coming from? How many jobs at the NCAA, conferences, and schools will be lost? So this revered tradition of amateurism is really no longer revered in the eyes of the law. It's really, it's spelled out. They've lost time and time again that it's no longer lawful.
Gina, I think you're exactly right when you say this does away with the amateur status. Already, athletes can bounce between schools year after year after year. I come from a school that's not a football powerhouse. I just noticed there are 50 new players on the football team coming up this fall. It's very hard, for the fan to get in there and cheer like, well, what happened to our running back? Oh, he's playing with Louisville now. So, and this seems like it's going to just fuel more of that.
Yeah, it really could come down to that. Symbolically, with this approval of this arrangement, it ends amateurism. And if this settlement is ultimately finalized and judicially approved and implemented, some college athletes will be paid lucratively. And to the extent amateur means an athlete who's not paid, well, that's ending entirely. And the second most unknown issue, I think, is the future of these booster collectives. What will happen there? That is really, a new era, a new edition of this Wild West that we've seen since name, image, and likeness has taken center stage in college sports over the last few years.
Yeah, for our international audience, these boosters are well heeled and they can just start shoveling cash right in players' back pocket. Okay, I have to ask you real quickly, running out of time, did the NCAA just it has this reputation of being a dinosaur-like entity. Did it just ignore possible change for decades and now has basically ruined college athletics?
Yeah, I think, again, this feels like a long time coming. And what we're seeing with this new governance is a little bit more forward thinking. And, starting in fall of 2025, schools can directly pay their athletes. And many within sport believes that schools will, kind of lean into their collectives for two reasons. One, you circumvent the revenue sharing cap by using a third-party entity to offer bonuses. And you can bend Title IX rules as collectives aren't under the umbrella of the university. So we're going to have to stay tuned to a lot of the interesting nuances as they continue to roll out with fall of 25.